And I'm gonna hand over now to Galina, who is gonna lead a panel discussion. So Galina, please take the stage.
I shall do that. And as already mentioned by Rebecca, during almost every conference, we have a career panel. And I'm very excited this year. It's called A Data Scientist, an ML Engineer, and a Statistician Walk into a Bar. And just to be clear, it's a virtual bar, because that's the kind of year we're having. So I would like to welcome Maddy Renström, who is a data science team lead at King, Färnström, who is tech lead for the data analysis and insights team at SL, and Marlena Maziarz, who was a speaker earlier today, who is a biostatistician at Lund. So please turn on your video and unmute yourself, and we'll try to make sure that we can get all of our videos together, or at least Katie and Sahara will take care of it while we start our conversation. So today we're going to discuss work both in industry and academia, and the different roles that belong under data science umbrella. And I think it's fair enough to say that 4 years ago when we started out, we had this notion of a T-shaped data scientist who was knowledgeable, really deep in the technical section, and then was kind of shallow in really good soft skills, including communication and stuff like this, and also had technical skills around data engineering. I think it's fair enough to say now that we view data science as including many areas, machine learning and AI and statisticians and data analysts and stuff like this. So there should be an interesting conversation. But I would actually like to start by asking you, girls, to introduce yourself and to tell us a little bit about your life journey. And I think Marlena already told us a little bit about hers. So maybe Maddie, you can go next.
Sure. Can you hear me properly?
We can hear you great.
Great. Yes, hi, my name is Maddie. Currently, I work as a data scientist team lead at King. I've been working at King for almost, over 7 years. I joined King in 2013 as one of the first data scientists, and actually the only female data scientist at that point in King Stockholm office. My journey, yes, ever since I was a kid, I was always because my dad is an engineer, so I was always very interested in things related to engineering side and science side. And when I was 4 or 5, when people asked me, what do you want to become when you grow up? I was like, scientist. I didn't really know what that means, but I was picturing I would wear one of those white robe and work in the lab all day and look really like one of those cool guys in the movies. And then, gradually with also my parents helping me get into science programs. So I got very interested in computer programming at about grade 10, joined a special science program in high school and participated in international level programming contest for some years in high school. Then I got really fascinated in AI at that point. At that point, I would say that there's no concept of deep learning or really real machine learning at that point. It was more some heuristic, some kind of algorithm that make you try to program the computer to play against a human in a simple chess game, for example. And then after that, with my growing passion in computer science and AI, I basically, voluntarily joined the computer science program in my bachelor degree. I continued the journey with my master program in computer science, finished my PhD degree in computer science in machine learning from University of Alberta. That was some years ago. And then after that, I moved to Sweden. I joined King as one of my first job in Sweden. And then after that, I've been happy working in King. First started as a data scientist, joined multiple teams with different projects, and then ended up where I am now as a team lead in King. Yes.
I think it's interesting. I understand that Marlena, you also went to school in Canada, right? So I guess you guys have that in common.
Yeah.
Yes.
Different province, but yeah.
Yeah, and it's
Just
kind
the code.
of interesting that way. Luminita, can you tell us a little bit briefly about yourself? And we, you know, like, we'll go down our list of questions. All right, before you go, if I may. So if you would like to ask some questions, and the questions about careers, I suggest using Q&A like you were using for the rest of the talks. And you can also upvote the questions. Thanks. Lumi?
Yes, my name is Luminita, actually. It's a Romanian name, so I'm originally from Romania. And that's where I did my bachelor degree in computer science. And that was not an obvious choice for me, like Maddie's. I was more interested actually in languages and such things, but I had a brother that was like a genius in computer science. So I got a bit interested and I wanted to see if I'm as good as him at that point. So I think that was part of my motivation. And then I started to see that, oh, this is quite fun, actually. And then after my bachelor, I did a master program in bioinformatics in Gothenburg, which was a very hot area at that point. Maybe it still is. And then I followed up with a PhD, also in bioinformatics in Stockholm. But then I started to wonder whether there were academic careers for me. And at that point, I decided that I want to try something else as well. So I switched to industry and I started working as a developer first. But then it was happening so much in data science and machine learning. And the bioinformatics, it is a lot of machine learning. It's just applied on biological data. So then I went towards data science. So I worked as a data scientist for about 4 years. And now I currently work as something that is called tech lead in a team that is called Data Analysis and Insights at SL. And for those that don't know what SL is, those that are not living in Stockholm, that's basically the company that takes care of all public transportation in Stockholm. And our team has huge ambitions. So we're going to build a lake house that is going to include all or a lot of the SL's data. And we also plan to do more and more advanced analytics and machine learning on this data. But we're still very much in the beginning.
Marlena, would you like to speak a little bit about, for those people who did not join us in the morning, would you like to describe a little bit more again about your journey?
Sure, just yeah, briefly. So yeah, I'm originally from Poland, but I ended up moving to Canada as a teenager. So in Toronto, I studied human biology. So I started with human biology, and very quickly I realized that it's not for me. I worked in a lab, like a wet lab in the summer and so on. And so then I took a computer science class, and I absolutely loved it. And that's how I ended up doing a bachelor in human biology and computer science. I continued with a master's in bioinformatics. And so all these things naturally led from one to the next. So after that, I worked as a data analyst, bioinformatician for a few years. And during that time, I became really interested in statistics. So I decided to do a PhD in biostatistics at the University of Washington in Seattle. And that led me to kind of study diabetes, type 1 diabetes. I started working with the professor that I work with now a lot, Åke Lermark, who's here in Malmö. So after my PhD, I ended up doing a postdoctoral fellowship at the National Cancer Institute. So all those, yeah, I think I worked on many different projects. Like so I did a lot of theory, but I also did a lot of applied projects. And so the job I have now is I'm at the Lund University Diabetes Center. I work as a biostatistician, and I do a lot of applied work. So it's not, yeah, it's not very.
I think it's very interesting because it's very interesting places that everybody's coming from. So Marlena is coming from a more domain space to start with, moving into statistics. And I think Some of the others are coming more from, from computer science, I would say, me with my computer science degree, I guess, moving more toward being more interested in certain domains. But one thing that we are realizing now is that as the field is maturing, people are starting to think more about careers and what careers look like. And I'm wondering how you think about it. What careers are available in your area, and what does it look like? And I guess we're going to get into a discussion about how it is different between industry and academia. So I can tell you that one thing we noticed with women in data science is that we get more and more questions around career tracks. People after some years in the industry, they're kind of starting to wonder around this. And maybe we could start again with Lumi or Maddie. Would one of you like to start with this one?
Sure. Of course, I'm not an expert in this. I can only speak about from my own experience. I think, at least the places I worked at, the career path in this field, there is not so much career path in this field. I mean, you have to go towards a manager position. So I think that's always like a trade-off. So you start to work, for example, with data science or data engineering, and you become more senior. And then in some places there is some sort of role as an architect where you can like think a little bit more of overviews. But often the only career path I saw is going towards manager, and then you lose this hands-on experience suddenly. So I find it as a pretty scary step. But that's the career path I've seen so far in the data science field. I'm not sure if Maddie and Marlena have seen something else. Maybe it's different in very large companies.
And I think it's also interesting because I think Maddie works in a more technology company, and I think technology companies, they have slightly different things happening inside them. They're more likely to have a career track for individual contributors and not just for you have to stop here and become a manager, otherwise there's nothing else you can do. But how do you feel about it, Maddie?
Yeah, yes, first of all, I agree with that. So, I mean, I started as a data scientist, fresh from university. Then after some years, company also start to build more and more. In the beginning, it's a small data scientist group with 4 people, like I said. Then we expand, we build up the team. So it's like you can work with more pure analytics data scientists, or you can do more data engineering, machine learning engineering side. So that's more coding heavy. Or if you're more business focused, you can also become more of a business manager. So focus more business side instead of tech side. Or some people are more interested into the economic side. So you can be like an economy designer for our games at King. Yes, so each of these kind of role later have its own track. So like Galina mentioned, there's individual contributor track and there's basically manager track. So depends on your interest, then you can shape your career path later on. You can, if you're a data scientist and want to be mainly do an individual contributor, then you can naturally become senior data scientist, principal data scientist, and follow that path. Or if you say you want to do more, management and business side, then you can become more of a business manager, or like I'm doing right now, become a team lead for a group of data scientists and build on from that track.
How many people do you have on your team right now, Maddie?
If we're talking about the whole team, I'm working for Candy Crush Soda Analytics. So the total
people reporting to you.
Yes, it's a team of right now almost 20 of us. So it's 15, 16 data scientists and some business managers together.
Okay, I think it's good to hear this because it's kind of a comparison point. What about you, Marlena? So you are here representing academia in a sense. So what does it look like, or it seems to look like, at least from your end?
Yeah, so I think for biostatisticians, it's a little bit different. You have 2 main tracks, industry or academia, but there's also so when I say industry, it doesn't just mean industry, but it could also mean, for example, the Food and Drug Administration, or some like pharmaceutical companies would be industry. But for example, like Health Canada or these government organizations that do a lot of demographic surveys and research and so on, they all need statisticians, as well as, I mean, there are tons and tons of jobs for applied biostatisticians working on medical applications. And of course, there's the academic track, right? So you can become a professor and do methods research and so on. Yeah, but I think there's a ton of opportunities for biostatisticians in applied. Yeah, and I don't see it as Lumi said that you have to become a manager, for example. There's the path, you know. So I see myself as being working as an applied biostatistician for a long time, and I really enjoy it. Yeah.
We'll call it an individual contributor, perhaps.
Yeah.
Academia, one way or another. I think we actually had a question from Lucy about what individual contributor track looks like. And I think she typed it in. I wonder if she's wondering about it in the industry or in academia. So, but let's take this one as more of an industry question, perhaps. Lucy says industry, okay. Maddie and Lumi, can you speak to that a bit in more detail about what the individual contributor track might look like? What it would be like if people decide not to go the management track?
I think maybe Maddie should talk about this, because I think it was a great point that you made. I think in large tech companies, that path exists, but in the companies I worked with, more they have a different focus maybe. It's not a clear path, it's more like, yeah.
And I would like to mention something. I would say that when I moved to Sweden, which was about 12 years ago, when I started showing up in Sweden, it was very clear that if you took software engineers, which is a slightly more established thing, it was very clear that a long time ago, you would hit the ceiling as an individual contributor, and you really had to become a manager. And it has changed. It has changed, and now you can, in most places, be an individual contributor, become more of an architect, basically. And so maybe that's, we're looking at making this transition at some point. Maybe there are places which do not make that career track available, and that's a conversation that should be had, because people who want to do a great individual work should not be pushed into management. And in some cases, they should not be pushed into management because they would not make great managers, to be entirely honest. So anyway, sorry, Maddie, please.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, what I have understood is, this is more like a bigger tech company thing, like not only for King, but also for, as I understand, like for bigger tech company like Facebook, Google, they all have this, either you go the individual contributor track, or you can go more the PM, the like product manager track or business manager track. So as individual contributor, you are more like, you're interested in more the tech solution, the tech side of the skills for your role. So so after becoming senior or even principal level in your role, take data scientist, for example, people in the company would take you as expert in that field. You could be expert in statistics or expert in certain type of tools we're building in the data science project. So in tech level, you're gonna be much more experienced than, for example, your manager in the company in that field. That makes you a great individual contributor for the company. So people would come to you with more deep tech questions. But then even though, you're in such a position as an individual contributor and you're expert in that area, you can still report to a more like a junior level data scientist, because they are more into the manager track. So they might still be your manager in the manager line. That's okay, because they are better in people management, but you're more like the expert in the field and be the main individual contributor in a company. That's how I understand.
So I think there was a question that came up, and we seem to be getting it more and more about when does a data scientist become a senior data scientist? And this question goes to all of you, but maybe Marlena, you should start with this one.
So we discussed this briefly between the four of us, just so everybody else knows. But so I think in academia, my sense is that you become a senior. For example, like if I were to call myself a senior biostatistician, I would say that I would want to have, you know, several years of experience working, right? So after finishing your PhD, you know a lot, but you don't have much experience with real data analysis, maybe. So a few years of experience, as well as maybe working with more junior analysts and so on, mentoring some people, teaching, things like that. And as you progress, you will see people, yeah, so I think it's a very subjective kind of thing, right? But I think there's a point where you feel like, yes, I feel like I'm senior and I can help the people who are coming in that are more junior than me. But I don't think there's like a very objective
maybe
threshold.
A question. Sometimes you can ask somebody privately, somebody who knows you well also, before kind of. But Lumi, do you have a comment on that? You're muted. Oh, now you're not here.
Yeah, I agree. It's quite subjective. I think, I don't know, in my mind, it's a little bit like when you fresh graduate, then you start by feeling you don't know anything when you go to a workplace. And then after 1 or 2 years, you feel you know everything and you question everything. And you think you're better than lots of people. And then after a while, you start to understand a little bit the bigger picture. So I think when you get to that point, when you start to understand, I think you start to see a little bit more like that some things will not work, that some things is not worth spending so much time on small details. When you start to think in a bigger picture, I think that's where you start to be senior. That's my opinion. But I think like the title is very different from different places. In some places you can easily be a senior. In other, I guess, again, like maybe at bigger tech companies that have they're very structured, you probably have quite clear checkpoints until you get that title.
I think I would probably, so I was at Google for 10.5 years. So Google had a very well fixed ladder. I guess we could have a separate discussion about whether people were promoted on meritocratic, in a meritocratic way, even though it was very precisely described. But I think this brings, and I would like to make one comment, and it brings to an interesting part of discussion that we would really like to have before we get to more questions. So one comment I would like to make is that I have seen companies that entice people with a title, but then give lower salary. I think that's something always to be looking up for. If they're, you know, like if suddenly they're offering you, I don't know, a director role, but the salary is not looking great, you should be asking yourself serious questions about how they're thinking. But also, I think we would like to talk a little bit about confidence and imposter syndrome, because I think women specifically are having a bit of trouble asking for things, maybe. And I don't know where to start this conversation, but I guess we all have some experiences with this. Would one of you like to pick this up?
So I was just going to say that the very often what I notice is that women will say, oh, maybe this is not a good question, or maybe it's a stupid question. Maybe, you know, so there's like this phrase of doubt at the beginning before they continue with whatever they wanted to say. And you, well, I think, well, at least, I don't know, I don't think I hear that as much from men. And I don't know why that is, you know?
So all of you, no saying this might be a stupid question, and I'm still guilty about it. I try to remove it. It's like, sometimes I show up and say, I'm gonna be the village idiot here. I'm gonna ask really basic questions. But yes, I shouldn't be doing that either, huh? But also in terms of careers, I think, you know, I don't know, it feels like when we do physical events, we usually have people come to us and it's like, oh, here's where we are, we're not sure what's going on and stuff like this. And sometimes people come and, you know, they're quite accomplished with quite a few years of experience. And I don't know, perhaps I'm looking for stories, but also advice to people. So, so Maddie, maybe you have something to say.
Yes, it's a very interesting topic. Actually, it's tons of experience or story I heard from others as well. And yeah, by coincidence, actually, at King we had International Women's Week last week to celebrate International Women's Day, and this imposter syndrome and how to make basically build up confidence in women at workplace is being a topic that people has been discussing, and we also had some topics and presentation about it. And it seems, if I remember the number correctly, it's like there's statistics saying like 69% of all people, not just women, all people working in IT and tech industry have imposter syndrome. And almost all developers, all people who know how to code, at some point of their career, they think that they are not good enough. They think they probably have made a bug in their program, and they think someone would find out, basically.
But if you write programs, you always have a bug, right? But yeah. Do you think that women have more pressure to be perfect?
Yes, in one way, I think so. I think it's more like a, especially in this industry, in data science, in data scientist industry, when women, like when I joined, I was one of the first. So I just felt like, okay, maybe, yes, I just accept, because that's how it is. When I was in school in computer science program, it's always like 1 out of 20, 30 people is always one girl out of all of them. And gradually you hear this, okay, companies start to have this, we try to reach 50-50, we try to have a good balance between man and woman. Then we try to promote and hire more women. But then on the women's side, they feel, okay, now I'm hired, but is it because I'm really good, so you want to hire me? Or is it because you want to reach this number to have a gender balance, so you hire me? So women tend to, especially women in low confidence, and tend to build up this this image. Maybe I'm not good enough, and I'm hired just because I'm a woman. Then they tend to have this pressure and work extra hard to prove that I'm just as good as men.
Maybe they should ask whether men ever ask the question. They say exactly the same question.
I think some do, but maybe not as many as proportion-wise, right?
What would you say about academia? Do you feel there's more pressure on women to be perfect?
You know what? I actually, to be perfectly honest with you, I don't feel that pressure personally. So what I notice a lot is just different personalities, but I don't see this distinction between men and women. Like I as a person, I'm a female, but I'm quite outspoken and quite yeah. So I maybe it's a personality thing also.
I was about to say it could be personality, but it could be academia, and it could also be that you are in life sciences, which tend to have significantly more women, because as you've probably seen in the talk that Sahar and I had, you know, so AI research in Facebook, what is it, 15% women, at Google 10% women. It is a rather different place to show up to when it is like that. When you're speaking out, perhaps. So maybe we should take a few questions, if that's okay. Or Lumi, would you like to say a few things on this last topic first?
No, I agree with Maddie there. I'm in a field that is very, at least in the place I am now, there are a lot of men, and I feel a lot of pressure that I should prove myself. And it's hard to say where it comes from. It comes from me, where it comes from the other field. But we talked a little bit before about this. I think it's a bit of a trap that you can fall into as a woman, especially if you have a family, that you feel that you have to work harder and take more and more time for that. And then there's a reason why, like, there are many more women that get burned out, for example, than men. And I think this is a bit of a trap that one has to be aware of.
And I think that's an interesting one also. So, and women, of course, do also more housework still, including in Sweden, if you look at the numbers. So, and the burnout is one of the topics we had. So I've been seriously burned out once, and I've had a minor burned out another times. You know, the second time you see it coming, kind of a thing. but I see a lot of people who burn out in our industry specifically. So I was, I guess I'm wondering also if data science being slightly more amorphous in expectations is just more prone to burnout, even before we get to the fact that we're women and we're more likely to be, you know, like to have to do extra stuff and to be perfectionists. So how do you feel?
I think so. I think it's multidisciplinary fields where you can't be good in everything. So you have to accept that there are a lot of things you don't know. And if you imagine, I don't know who showed, maybe you showed that slide with how many techniques are now in data science, and you will know a very fraction of those, and that may be hard to accept.
Mm-hmm. What do you think, Maddie? How do you feel about, you know, looking at burnout and the field of data science? What do you think about that?
Yeah, it's actually a common thing, especially now with work from home. I do feel I mean, myself a few times changing from my senior data scientist role to team lead role last year. I felt like I always try to be on top of everything. It's a new team, and I try to understand every single piece of what people's doing. And then you just put so much pressure. Like Lumi is saying, it's hard to say if it's from outside that you want to prove that you're better. You're not as you're better than man or just as good as man. Also from inside, like I want to prove myself that I can do this. Then you take on too much on yourself at some point. Then you feel, okay, now I need to just learn to say no and say, I'm not attending this meeting, or it's okay to not know everything, what's happening in the team, but just do what I'm good at or what I should focus for this week. And then try to, put that pressure away. And then you feel it's actually much easier. You focus on a few things and get things done much better than take everything on yourself.
How do you feel about this, Marlena? What's relationship of academia and burnout?
Yeah, so actually, I kind of agree with Maddie that I think I'm not sure if women talk about this more, but I hear more women saying that they're overwhelmed. For example, it's harder to say no when somebody's asking you, can you help me with this? Can you help me with that? Can you do this, that? You don't want to say no because you don't want to. I mean, you want to feel like you can do everything, right? You want to be, so you want to help everybody with everything. And maybe I'm speaking for myself a lot as well. So I'm learning to say no now.
I think this does represent many of our experiences, right? Look at the smiles.
Yeah, but I've heard this from many other women as well. So it takes a while to learn to say no and have clear boundaries of, yes, I'm going to do this, but no, I'm also going to take care of myself in some, and have respect for myself,
And that's very important. So the first team, when I was fresh out of grad school, I landed at Google and a team that was called EdStats and then was quickly renamed into decision support. It was basically an analytics support team. And as you can imagine, everybody had questions. Everybody wanted questions answered and stuff like this. And finally, and we had this objective and key results, quarterly objectives and key results. And finally, one of the good managers I had basically said, one of your objectives every quarter should be to say no at least 3 times. This is literally the thing that you're supposed to do, because otherwise it's just like, people are so nice, you just want to say yes to them, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and it's very difficult to kind of go, I'm sorry, I have no time for this one. So I think this is actually a very important question. So feel free to come to us if you want to talk about it. But I would like to now go with the questions on the Q&A. So we start with Ellie's question. What kind of mindset and soft skills do you feel are most valuable for both industry and academia?
Mindset. In academia, I think curiosity. I think you have to be curious and you have to be willing to dig and be patient and dig deep in because you don't know what the answer is, right?
Sometimes you don't know what the question is, what I remember.
Well, yeah, so that's a bigger problem. But even if you know what the question is, it's I think you have to be very curious, you have to be open to learning new skills. And so the field is changing. So for me, in biostatistics, the field is changing very quickly, just probably as for you guys. I mean, the technology is, all the tools are being developed and methods are being developed. So there's a lot to know, a lot of new information to absorb. But also, I think you have to be, I think curiosity will be, I think like if you have curiosity and drive, and then I think you'll do well.
What do you think, Lumi?
I don't know what valuable means here. Like, from which perspective, valuable? I think if you want a career, if you want a career, let's say, if you want to climb the ladder, so to say, I think self-confidence is extremely important, especially when you're a woman, to not be too sensitive and don't take anything personal. I think that's extremely important. If you think in general about skills that are really appreciated, I think to have low prestige is really good, and to be open to learn new things and to be open to improve yourself, I think is really important.
It's interesting that there's a lot of talk about learning mindset that is happening right now among those who talk about AI adoption also. It seems to be quite essential for not just for data scientists, but a lot of different groups of people who kind of need to deal with this type of stuff. Maddie, would you like to comment on that, or should we move to the next question?
I think, yeah, they maybe just add one more thing. I felt, at least for me, moving from academia to industry, because I had PhD, and when I graduated, I had a lot of big plans. Oh, I'm gonna apply machine learning in this field, in that field. And then when I come to industry, the first year, I was really like frustrated. Why don't you listen to this idea, then apply these machine learning ideas? So you have a lot of ambition, then you get a little bit frustrated in industry in the beginning. And then my advice would be, yeah, try to connect what you want to do in research, in, for example, machine learning or AI, to the business you're working in. That's most important if you're in the industry. So you see, you shouldn't be like, I want to apply machine learning case or AI case to this, but you need to try to connect and see what business opportunity are there. Why are we doing that? And then try to motivate from that direction in industry. Is my advice.
So we're going to go to the next question. Do you all live in Stockholm? And if yes, is it because data science offers interesting careers only for people living in big capital cities? Are companies willing to recruit people living in more remote areas for these roles nowadays? And first of all, I think 3 of us are in Lund, and Marlena, wait, 3 of us are in Stockholm, and one was, you're in Lund, right?
Malmö, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So would one of you like to, I can answer this question, but I think it's better if...
I mean, how remote are we talking about? Because I think if you want to work from very remote places, I think being a biostatistician is a great job because you can do everything remotely. So for my job, I'm working on Zoom now exclusively, remotely. And it's, I think you can do that. But if you want to commute.
I think it's much better than it used to be. But it used to be that really people were building teams. I mean, it's a numbers game, right? There are just more jobs in bigger cities. And it's bigger companies that would have data science and AI teams. And bigger companies are in slightly bigger places, I would say. But it is changing because I see more smaller places building things out. And I think I see more remote jobs at least. So if anything, I think this is probably a better year if one wants to live remotely. And otherwise, I would say I know some people who are consulting as consultants are working remotely and they're extremely successful. And, you know, like that's part of the deal, you know, they're remote, they can augment your remote team.
Yeah, I agree with Galina. I mean, it's like a chicken egg thing. Like, is it because companies are in big cities, so there are more jobs there, or is it more people are all mostly living in big cities, so company also choose to be in big cities so that more people are willing to work there, so they don't need to relocate to smaller places? but I would say currently, yeah, with work from home situation, yeah, yeah, we work from home all the time. It works great with Zoom, with video calls.
And I understand that some companies, like, was it Spotify, that is going to continue working remotely after all of this is over, perhaps? So anyway, next question. So I'm going to actually pick a second one because it's been hovering as #1 for a while. We know that pay transparency is one of the major ways to achieve gender pay equality. Given that the data for data science in the Nordics is sparse, what is a good way to know you're being paid for what you're worth? Has WiDS thought about creating a paid data set? So actually, yes, we thought about that. We have a project we might kick off this year, in fact, that will try to understand better what data scientists, at least in Sweden, are working on. And a salary survey is something that has been much in demand for a long time, but you guys know better than anybody else, this is also sensitive data. So we want to make sure that we do it right. And we cannot just survey our community, because you guys know better than anybody else that if we do it will be an unbalanced data set, and we will not be able to determine whether men and women are paid differently. So, but this is a serious question. The only thing I can say is that O'Reilly has reports for Europe looking at some of this stuff. I don't think they're looking at men and women, but you can see a little bit on salaries perhaps over there. But nobody has good questions. And I get these questions from people who hire also. Is it like fair representation? You know, that's a difficult one. I don't think there's a benchmark of any sort.
And say
in academia.
Sorry.
Go ahead. No, in academia, there's so I can ask the HR and say, you know, what is the range of the salaries for biostatisticians, and they will just send me the report. So except I will not know if they're male or female, right? So I just know for a given job title, what is the salary range, and then I can compare myself to that salary range.
I think we were going to also reach out to the unions and see if they have some interesting data around it. But the problem that came up, we realized, is that we have so many names. Our field has so many names that it makes it a little bit difficult also. So, but you know, we'll see. Stay tuned.
So this actually gave me one thought about the discussion I had internally with a woman at King in data science. We had one topic about men are probably better at negotiation. So when you get offered the job, men probably tend to try to negotiate and have a higher salary with the company than women usually feel. Yeah, at least for me, I felt that, oh yeah, you gave me this number, it's good, and you just take it.
Yeah, so, I do the same. I know, but yeah, you're right. Men,
yeah, I think men are much also from my experience with people I worked with, I get this feeling. Yeah, women usually just feel happy. Yeah, you give me this, and the men would be more like, really? Shouldn't it be higher? Like, so women should build more.
So there's a great book called Women Don't Ask. I used to recommend it to people a lot. I don't know how much it aged because it's an old book. It was very much about that. But from personal experience, I can tell you my first job, I didn't ask. I did exactly this, right? And then I read that book, and ever since then, I asked every single time. It's super uncomfortable. I usually call a friend the night before to get a pep talk. And every single time I got more. So ask every single time when you negotiate.
I completely agree with that. That's my strategy as well. Always ask. I mean, the worst that can happen is you say get
part of the whole thing, right? Because once you sign a contract, you have no more negotiating power at that point, and also they will respect you this way. You know, like
I think the funny thing for me is that the best salary negotiation I ever had at a job was when I said I want to be paid as much as my male colleague that does the same job, and that was the best like pay raise I ever got. So I think that says something. Yeah,
I think that works pretty well too. So let's answer a few more questions then. So for a new graduate, even entry-level positions seem to require minimum 3 years of experience in data science, ML, deep learning positions. How do new graduates search for jobs in Sweden when max we have summer job experience?
I can say what I think. I think this these requirements at the jobs, they're often wishful thinking. So I think one should apply anyway.
And the guys don't think of it as wishful thinking, by the way, because there are actually studies that show that women would apply if they satisfy every single requirement of a job, and men would apply if they satisfy, like, I don't know, a third of the requirement. So number one, if you are writing job descriptions, don't do that. Number two is like, you know, if you're a woman, kind of like brave it. The worst thing that will happen is that somebody is going to tell you a no. Don't take it personally.
Mm-hmm.
So, but it is interesting. I think in some cases, I also wonder, some companies which are less mature ask for, I don't know, 10 years of deep learning experience or something like this. In some cases, more years than some technology was on the market. And then you should ask how mature that company is if they don't understand this is the case and whether you want to be there. For a machine learning graduate, what is the appropriate profession? Data science, data analyst, or machine learning engineer only?
I think that's really a personal preference, right? Because yeah, if you are more into coding, programming, building up platforms, Google Cloud and so on, then maybe machine learning engineer would be a better fit. But if you're more interested in statistics, data analysis, building up business case on top of data, then data scientist or data analyst would be more of a better fit. So it's yeah, it's really which is better.
But do you feel like these distinctions are clear? Do you think we all have the same understanding of what these things mean?
No, it's really company dependent, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's changed over the years too. So for example, 5 years ago, if you were a machine learning engineer, you were a unicorn who could do data engineering and building machine learning models and doing a whole bunch of other stuff. Whereas now, if you're a machine learning engineer, a lot of the times you're a junior engineer who knows machine learning, but not necessarily some of the other aspects of the work. So, but it's a difficult one. I don't think we have clear descriptions and clear understanding, so you always need to ask. The other thing I would say is that our field is becoming to specialize. And what I see is that what you start doing at the beginning of your career is what you may end up continuing doing for a while. So if you want to be building machine learning model or models, do not take a data analyst job because you will get stuck. You might end up being stuck in that corner, and vice versa, of course, because, you know, think about what your preference is and make sure to ask carefully the questions about the work. I think it's getting to be more essential to start in the right place than it was 4 or 5 years ago. 4 or 5 years ago, it was like, whatever the world, you know, wherever you start, you can move around much more easily.
Yeah, I was going to say that exactly. I would look at not the job title, but what is the job? Is the job, the things you will be doing in the job and learning in the job, are those things that you want to be learning about and doing? Because that's how you evolve and grow. I think that's the important thing. And yeah.
It's very unfortunate. We are running out of time, but I kind of want to pick one more question at least. I would actually like, with apologies to whoever asked the first question, I would like to pick the second one because we have Marlena also here. What do you think of the advantages and disadvantages of choosing the academic path versus the industry path are, and how do you move between them?
So I think, so I will say in terms of moving between them.
To the other ladies who also have their doctorates, right?
No, so the moving between them, I think it's easier to move from academia to industry. It's harder to move from industry to academia, at least that's what I've seen. But advantages, disadvantages, I mean, so advantages of my job is that I think it's very flexible. But I think it's also very individual, right? So, and I don't want to, okay, you guys go ahead. I don't want to take up all the time.
I agree with Marlena. The biggest advantage of academia is flexibility, according to me. I was in academia and I felt, yes, you have more flexible, if you're not teaching, if you're doing mainly research, you have more flexible hours. And yes, you're not like in the industry. You usually have deadlines in the industry. You have more business goals and yeah, pressures from the business side of the company. But the disadvantage, I would say, it's more, at least for me, why I choose industry in the end was when I was in academia, when I come home from work, I still think about work because it's research. You have it in your head all the time. You're taking a shower. Oh, what's that problem about? You keep thinking about it. But for industry, I usually like when I come home, yes, this is home. I'm not gonna think about things in the office, at least before we started working from home. So that's the advantage of industry, I feel. So I feel, yeah, it's good and bad. What you prefer, what you want to, yeah. If you want flexibility or if you want more, yeah.
I can tell you basically as a person running my own company now that that's not the case. It feels more like I could back again in academia, you know, that stuff is in your head. Lumi, would you like to say one last thing and we're going to wrap up and go?
Yeah, in my case was, I think, more about, I still think about work at home a lot, even after being in industry, but I think it's more about personality a little bit, because I think my experience, at least, in industry is more focused on results and getting things done in a different way that I felt it was in academia. And for example, for me, it was quite clear that this suits me so much better. So I think it's a little bit on what kind of person you are and what suits you better.
Yeah. And I think that's a good way to wrap it up.